Let me tell you something about silence. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It creeps in, settles between routines, and before you realize it, you're living in a museum of things that used to feel alive. I was the kind of husband who folded his socks. Not just folded, matched the patterns, smoothed the seams. I lined them up in the drawer like I was preparing them for inspection. She laughed at that once, said it was adorable in a weird little grandpa way. I smiled because I thought she meant it kindly. I was still folding socks the night it all began to unravel. Her phone buzzed while she was in the shower. Normally, I wouldn't touch it. Respect, boundaries, all that. But the message preview just flashed there. Big as betrayal. Rory, can't stop thinking about last night. You wore me out, Whitlock. I stared at it like it was a math problem I couldn't solve. Rory, last night. Wore me out. There was no punctuation, no apologies, no context. Just digital intimacy spelled out in my kitchen while the woman I married was shampooing like nothing had changed. I put the phone down, carefully, like it might explode. Then I opened the fridge, took out the milk, and poured exactly half a cup into the mug she used every morning. That stupid yellow mug that said, "World's okayest wife." She bought it as a joke. I'm starting to think it was a prophecy. She came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, humming. She kissed my cheek and said something about getting a mani-pedi before her strategy session downtown. I nodded. Maybe I blinked. Maybe not. But something in me clicked like the lock on a safe. I smiled, handed her the coffee. "Don't be late," I said. That was Monday. By Wednesday, I'd mirrored her phone. I used the same tools I used for clients in my cybersecurity work. Nothing fancy, just enough to read her texts, emails, track her location. A passive observer in the play that had become my life. The show was called Tessa Whitlock's Other Life, and I was sitting front row, popcorn in hand. Rory wasn't a coworker. He wasn't even subtle. He sent her playlists, memes, voice notes saying how he loved the way she said ridiculous. They had nicknames. They had jokes. They had a hotel room booked under his name at the Peninsula for Thursday night. She said it was a conference. Marketing seminar, she called it. There was no seminar. No keynote speakers. Just a king bed with high thread counts and a bottle of champagne. They split before noon. I didn't confront her. No, that's not how I work. I kept the routine. Morning coffee, polite smiles, small talk about groceries, and her mother's cat's kidney surgery. But inside, I was building something. A structure. A plan. A psychological puzzle with 1,000 pieces that all clicked into place while she thought I was watching Netflix and eating microwave burritos. She didn't know I was watching her, in every sense of the word. She didn't know I was listening, not just to her words, but to her timing, her silences, her inconsistencies. The story she was telling the world was different than the one she whispered into Rory's chest at 2:14 a.m. on a hotel balcony. And that's when I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to vanish. Not in a blaze of anger, not with slammed doors or torn up photos. No. I was going to vanish in the kind of way that left a permanent echo, the kind of absence that lives inside a person longer than presence ever could. Because you see, Tessa Whitlock married the man who folded socks. But what she didn't know, I also know how to unfold a person's sense of security, one careful crease at a time. The first thing to go was the toothbrush. Not both, just mine. She didn't notice. Or if she did, she chalked it up to some mundane reason. I could almost hear her internal monologue. He probably packed it for work or dropped it behind the counter. Tessa never sweated small details. That was my department. That's how I knew this would work. She came home Thursday night humming some old Fleetwood Mac tune, hills clicking on hardwood like punctuation. She threw her coat over the couch, not even glancing toward the dining room table where dinner sat untouched. Her wine glass was still half full from the night before. I hadn't topped it off. That used to be our thing. She poured herself a fresh one, kicked off her shoes, and asked, "Did you walk the dog?" "We don't have a dog." That was the moment I knew she was on autopilot, saying things without listening, existing beside me like a roommate who owed rent and eye contact. I just nodded. I didn't even ask what the seminar was like. Why bother? She'd have a script prepared, maybe even a new brochure in her purse. The next morning, I turned the thermostat 2 degrees higher than usual. Tessa hated a warm house, said it made her skin feel clingy. I left it that way, and she never said a word. Her necklace, the one she swore she lost in Palm Springs, was in the back of her sock drawer. I moved it to the freezer behind the peas. Again, nothing. She didn't notice. She wasn't really living in the house anymore, just gliding through it. That's how erasure begins, quiet and patient. On Sunday, I told her I might be traveling next week. A conference, I said with a straight face. Cybersecurity, some new AI threat workshop. She barely looked up from her phone. Yeah, okay. Just leave me a grocery list. A grocery list. For a man who was already halfway out the door. Perfect. That night, I opened a new bank account. Separate. Clean. Registered to my initials and a forwarding address in a town she'd never heard of. I paid the deposit on a short-term lease for a fully furnished apartment one state over. Industrial loft. Tall windows. No ghosts in the closet. I also bought a cheap burner phone. It wasn't paranoia. It was the same strategy one used when securing sensitive client data. Control what leaves a trace. Control what stays invisible. Meanwhile, Tessa continued performing contentment. Selfies with motivational quotes, story posts of late nights in the office, and one particularly galling photo of her holding a salad caption fueling greatness. Rory liked it with a flame emoji. She never posted a single photo of me. Not even one of my plate at dinner. By Wednesday, I started phase 2. I stopped signing my name. On the fridge note? Just picked up dry cleaning. On the whiteboard calendar? No initials next to errands. Even my Netflix profile vanished. Gone. Like I'd never existed. She mentioned it once in passing. Weird, did the Wi-Fi log me out? I shook my head. Probably just a glitch. I was erasing myself with the precision of someone who'd studied her attention span. And I knew, deep down, this wouldn't hit her until everything was gone. Until I was gone. But first, I needed proof. The kind you can't argue with. The kind you can't cry your way around when the time comes. So I waited. Until she slipped. Because they always do. The night she forgot our dinner plans wasn't marked on the calendar. But it had been carved into my memory 3 months earlier, when we made the reservation. Her idea, even. A quiet dinner at Salvatore's. Our anniversary. The one date I thought even she couldn't pretend not to remember. The maitre d' looked at me with the kind of sympathy usually reserved for funeral homes. Would you like to be seated anyway? He asked, already guessing the answer. No, I said. I'll wait. I waited 47 minutes. Didn't order. Just sipped water and pretended to scroll through my phone while the candle at my table burned lower than my expectations. She didn't call. She didn't text. By minute 48, I was already writing the next move in my mind. When I got home, the house was dark. Not quiet, just dark. Her laughter came from upstairs, muffled through a Bluetooth speaker. I followed the sound like a detective approaching a crime scene. She was in bed, in yoga pants and one of my old hoodies, eating ice cream straight from the container while FaceTiming someone who was absolutely not her mother. Rory, stop it, she giggled, toe curled in that way she used to do with me. No, I'm not drunk. Just vibing. She didn't see me. I didn't interrupt. I walked back downstairs, careful not to make a sound. Sat at the kitchen table. My dinner jacket still buttoned. My car keys still in hand. I stared at the fruit bowl. The bananas had gone soft, the apples glossy from neglect. That was our marriage, display ready, slowly rotting. At 11:02 p.m., she texted me from upstairs. Hey babe, didn't realize you were out. Everything okay? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I set the next stage. I began printing. Color copies. Time-stamped screenshots. Audio recordings from the nights she thought I was asleep. The footage I'd quietly collected from the baby monitor camera we never turned off, because we never had kids. She used it to check on the dog before he died. I used it to check on the truth. The evidence folder grew thicker each day, alphabetized, cross-referenced, stored in both digital and physical formats. She thought I was still folding socks. What I was really folding was her future into a neat little packet of consequences. The best part? She had no idea. The next morning, she kissed me goodbye with strawberry on her breath. I had the weirdest dream, she said casually. We were having dinner, but I showed up late. You were mad. I nodded. Weird. Did you eat? She asked. I'm full, I said. And I was. Not from food, but from clarity. Later that day, I booked the hotel room. Not for her. Not for me. But for what came next. The dinner she forgot wasn't the betrayal. It was the rehearsal. For the moment, I'd make sure she never forgot. The room I booked had no view. No minibar. No luxury. Just 4 beige walls, a desk, a lamp, and a mirror that took up half the far wall. Perfect. I checked in under the name T. Whitlock. Not because I was feeling petty, but because I was feeling precise. She'd used my name to book her secret hotel nights more than once. It was poetic, in a tight-lipped, receipt trail sort of way. I brought two things with me. A thumb drive. A pin that didn't work. The thumb drive was obvious, evidence, backup, leverage. But the pin? That was for her. She liked to twirl one when she lied. Said it helped her think clearly. I figured it might help her recognize herself when the time came. I left the room as it was, untouched. Then I waited. 2 days. 3. The 4th day, she gave me an opening. "I've got a meeting across town," she said, smoothing her hair like someone prepping for a confession she'd already rehearsed. "Might run late. Don't wait up." I said, "Of course. Good luck." She smiled like I was the fool. What she didn't know was that I'd already redirected her Uber account to ping me with location updates. And at exactly 7:42 p.m., she arrived at the same hotel I'd checked into under her name. Different floor, different man. Same script. They didn't check in together. Not right away. Staggered arrivals. The kind you only learn from practice or secrets. I waited exactly 18 minutes. Then I sent the room number. To Rory. From a burner number, anonymous. Room 411. Thought you should know. A friend. I don't know if he'd believe it. But if he did, it would be enough. Because here's the thing about affairs. They're rarely built on loyalty. They're built on the illusion of being special. And nothing breaks illusion like suspicion. She came home that night reeking of expensive cologne that wasn't mine. Her lipstick was uneven. She didn't bother washing it off before crawling into bed. She said, "Long day." I said, "Sure." She didn't notice the red light blinking on the living room camera, or the envelope on her desk labeled pending. She was already too far gone to read the signs. The next morning, her mood had shifted. She moved slower, checked her phone more, asked if I'd seen her gold earrings. "I haven't," I said. "Maybe they're at the office?" She stared at me for half a second too long. There it was, the flicker, the beginning of doubt. And that's all I needed. The next step? Let her chase her own tail. The first thing to shift was her tone. Not the words. Those were still crisp, casual, curated like everything else she projected into the world. But underneath, there was a delay. Like she had to translate her thoughts into safe language before speaking them aloud. She asked, "Did you take the trash out?" What she meant was, "Did you go through it?" She asked, "You didn't happen to use my laptop, did you?" Translation, "Did you find the folder I forgot to delete?" I answered both questions with the same phrase, "Nope. Everything's as you left it." Which was true, in the most technically devastating sense possible. She was starting to notice the small things now. The toothbrush, finally. "Did you get a new one?" she asked one morning, eyes darting between my empty holder and the mini tube she still shared. "No," I said. "Just been brushing at work." She nodded too fast. Laughed too high. Right, makes sense. But it didn't. And that's what made it stick. It's strange how quickly a person starts unraveling when they think the story might be slipping out of their hands. Suddenly, every silence becomes an accusation. Every joke feels like a trapdoor. She stopped humming. That was the first real sign. Tessa always hummed. When she cooked, when she emailed, when she poured wine into a glass she never finished. Little off-key riffs from 2000s pop songs she never admitted to loving. It used to fill the house like scent. Like presents. Now? Silence. Except for questions. More of them, each day, circling like a hawk around a carcass she wasn't ready to admit was dead. "Hey, where's the picture of us in Vermont?" "Which one?" "The one on the bookshelf." "It's not there anymore." "Strange," I said. "Maybe it fell." The frame was in the storage unit already, wrapped in a towel, labeled with a date. I wasn't sentimental, I was strategic. I needed her to notice what was missing before she noticed what was being built. A week passed. She came home later than usual, hair slightly damp, smelling like a perfume I didn't recognize. That used to drive me mad. The guessing, the wondering. But now? Now, it was just confirmation that she thought I was still the man who could be lied to with a smile and a spritz of lavender. We sat on opposite ends of the couch like two characters at the end of a failed play. She scrolled through her phone. I scrolled through time. "Are you okay?" she asked. There it was. The first real crack. I nodded. "Why wouldn't I be?" "I don't know. You've been quiet." "Noticed that. Did you?" She looked up. Her expression slipped just enough to let something real surface. Worry. Guilt. Maybe both. I've been thinking. Maybe we should take a trip. Just us. A trip. I said, amused. No. Yeah. I mean, it's been a while. We've been in a weird place. I just thought. You mean like Vermont? She blinked. What? Where the photo was taken, I clarified. The one you mentioned. The one that vanished. Oh. She paused. Yeah. Something like that. I didn't answer. Just sipped my tea, eyes never leaving hers. Let the quiet do what it does best. She folded first. Did something happen? Depends on when you're asking. She tilted her head, unsure if I was being poetic or strategic. It was both. Okay, she said, setting down her phone. Let's just talk. Please. If something's wrong, let's talk about it. I almost admired her. The pivot was flawless. From suspicion to sincerity in under 10 seconds. If I didn't know her so well, I might have believed it. But I did. And I'd stopped falling for it the same week she booked a king suite under a fake name and forgot to log out of the reservation system. We'll talk, I said. Just not tonight. Why not? Because tonight isn't for answers. Tonight is for noticing the space between them. She didn't respond. Just stared, trying to decide if I'd gone cryptic or crazy. I went to bed early. Left her on the couch with her half-empty wine and a Spotify playlist she didn't listen to. I knew she wouldn't follow. Not immediately. I'd trained her for years to give me space when I needed it. But this time, the space wasn't a request. It was a weapon. And she just stepped inside it. At 2:03 a.m., she came into the room. I was awake but didn't let her know. She hovered by the door. I could feel her watching me, waiting for something, breathing patterns, movement, a sign that she still lived rent-free in my peace. But I gave her nothing. She retreated without a word. Good. Let her wander through the corridors of doubt I'd built, wondering which door held the truth and which one held her reflection. And when she found the mirror I left propped up in the spare room, yes, that mirror, I hope she really looked. Not at the glass. Not at the frame. But at the note I taped to the bottom corner. What's missing isn't the problem. It's what you never noticed was there. Let her puzzle over that. Let her spiral. Because we weren't even halfway through. And the space between answers? It was about to become the loudest thing in her life. It came from someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Cameron. Tessa used to joke that Cam was the human lie detector, too observant, too blunt, too hard to impress. Naturally, she kept her distance. When we got married, Cam told me, she's polished, man. Watch for the places that don't shine. Back then, I thought that meant Cam didn't like her. Now I realize he was giving me a warning disguised as cynicism. The message was simple. I saw Tessa last week. Thought you should know, she introduced herself as single. Attached, a photo. Tessa. Red dress. Same one she swore she gave away last fall during her closet purge. Arm around a man I didn't recognize. Somewhere upscale. Crystal glasses on the table. His hand resting just a little too comfortably on her lower back. I stared at it for a full minute before saving it to the archive folder I now called the collection. I replied. Where? Kim answered fast. He always did. Some art benefit downtown. I was there with Elise. Didn't even realize it was her at first. She looked different. Like someone who'd already rewritten their story. That line stuck with me. Rewritten their story. Because that's what betrayal really is. It's not just disloyalty, it's narrative theft. Someone else taking your name, your moments, your future, and editing them into a version where you were never the main character. I thanked Cam. Told him I was handling it. What I didn't say was that he just accelerated my timeline. That night, I printed the photo, slipped it into a plain envelope. No note, no threat, just the truth frozen in glossy paper, time-stamped, undeniable. I left it on the kitchen counter next to her vitamins. She found it at 7:43 a.m. sharp. I heard the pause in her footsteps, the silence, then the soft intake of breath. Not horror, not guilt, recognition. She didn't say a word. Just left it there, unopened, even though we both knew she'd already seen it. When she came back from her strategy brunch later that afternoon, she tried to slip into small talk. How was your morning? She asked, carefully. Productive, I said. She nodded, lips pressed into a line. Then, did you leave that for me? I looked up from my book, let the quiet sit a moment. What do you think? She didn't answer. Just crossed the room and poured herself a glass of wine she wouldn't finish. I noticed her hands were shaking. Good. The first real tremor. Look, she said eventually, I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I think you do, I said. Her voice rose, just slightly. Why are you doing this? Doing what? This thing. The distance. The games. You're leaving notes and pictures like I'm supposed to. What, confess? I closed the book. Set it down with precision. You don't need to confess, Tessa. I already know. Know what? There it was. The first crack in her voice. Not defiance, deflection. I stood up, walked over, picked up the envelope she pretended not to open. Let's not insult each other, I said. We're past that. She didn't argue. Instead, she asked the most telling question of all. Are you going to leave? I didn't smile, but I wanted to. That was the first time she asked me about leaving, which meant, in her head, she finally understood I might. Not storm out. Not beg. Not make a scene. Just disappear. I didn't answer her question. Instead, I asked one of my own. Why did you introduce yourself as single? Her face flickered. Who told you that? I stepped back, tilted my head. Interesting choice of reply. She turned away, eyes wide, lips parted, caught between anger and panic. And then, just like that, she walked upstairs, heels on wood, fast and furious. 5 minutes later, I heard drawers opening, then the unmistakable click of the hallway closet door. She was checking to see what was missing, checking to see how much of her story I'd already taken with me. By morning, the panic had turned into politeness again. Oatmeal for two. The smell of cinnamon. A song playing softly from the kitchen speaker. Her eyes were red. I didn't mention it. That evening, she tried again. Maybe we should see someone. See who? I asked. A therapist. A couples counselor. Just talk things out. I think we both made mistakes. I set down my fork. Looked her in the eye. I'm not angry, Tessa. She blinked. You're not. No. I'm observant. She swallowed hard. So, what happens now? I stood up. We live. We sleep. We eat. And then, we wait. For what? For the part where the truth finally stops knocking and just walks in. And with that, I walked out of the room. Left her sitting there, wrapped in a performance even she no longer believed in. The truth wasn't the photo. The truth was the space it left behind. And the friend who knew too much? He was just the spark. The fire was still coming. She found the archive on a Thursday. I hadn't meant for her to. Not yet. But even the best-laid plans can get impatient when the pieces start aligning themselves. She was snooping, not searching. There's a difference. Searching is desperate. Snooping is confident. And Tessa was always confident until she opened that folder on my desktop labeled simply Receipts. That's when the confidence broke. Inside, screenshots, timestamps, hotel confirmations, and chat transcripts she'd long since deleted from her phone. I had them all. Every flotation. Every lie. Even the voice note from Rory, the one where he whispered, I'll pick you up after he's asleep. She didn't say anything that night. But her breathing was off, and she knocked over a glass she didn't clean up. In the morning, her phone was gone from the kitchen table. So was she. By noon, I got a text. We need to talk. I didn't know you were watching me this whole time. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. She came home before dark, like a dog testing the strength of an invisible fence. Her keys jangled like they were announcing a truce. She walked into the living room and sat down across from me like she was ready for her close-up. I made a mistake, she began. I looked up. Which one? She blinked. The rehearsed speech faltered. I didn't mean to fall in love with him, she said. You didn't, I replied. Silence. And then she whispered, What now? Now, I said, standing. Now the story starts over. Only this time, I'm the one writing it. From that moment on, she tried. She tried hard. She cleaned the house top to bottom. Cooked meals she never used to. Laughed too loudly at shows we never watched together. She started sending little thinking of you texts in the middle of the day, like paper towels on a burning house. But I didn't engage. Not cold, not cruel, just precise. I was polite. Present. But not there. And that made her unravel faster than any rage ever could. She began asking questions she already knew the answers to. Do you still love me? I did. Is there someone else? No. Are you going to leave? Eventually. The silence after that one lasted 2 whole days. That was her record. By Saturday, she snapped. I came home to find the archive folder gone from my desktop. She deleted it. Emptied the trash. Wiped the browser history. But what she didn't know, that was just a copy. The original was stored offline. A sleek little USB drive, tucked in the back of a drawer marked tax receipts. I never trusted clouds. People think they're invisible. But clouds are just water pretending to be air. That night, she cornered me in the hallway. I want to fix this, she said. Tell me how. You can't, I replied. This isn't a flat tire. It's a totaled car. The frame's bent. Her lips trembled. She reached out, fingers grazing mine. I still love you. I met her eyes. But you don't respect me, I said. And love without respect is pity. 1 week later, I sent out the invitations. Not to a party. Not to a court date. No. This was for something more subtle. More deliberate. Join us for a special evening of reflections and resolutions. Black cardstock. Gold trim. No RSVP necessary. She was confused when she saw them on the counter. What is this? She asked. You'll see. I rented a gallery space downtown. Minimalist, intimate. 1 evening only. On the walls, framed images. Screenshots. Printed chats. GPS timelines. Carefully redacted for privacy, but not so redacted that the implication was lost. Each guest walked through with a glass of wine and a slow-building realization. Friends. Colleagues. Her sister. People she told her version of our story to. She arrived late. When she stepped inside and saw the display, her face collapsed in real time. She turned to me, standing by the wine table. What is this? She asked, voice low and cracking. This, I said, is context. You gave them a story. I'm just giving them the rest. You're humiliating me, she whispered. No, I said. I'm finishing the sentence. She walked out before the last guest arrived. She left her keys on the bench outside. I watched from the window as she sat in her car, unmoving, until the engine turned over and the tail lights disappeared into the night. I stayed until the last guest left. A few offered condolences. Others just nodded. Nobody asked for the full story. They didn't have to. The next morning, the house was quiet. I made breakfast like always. Eggs, toast, 1 slice of avocado. Hers sat untouched. She came down slowly. Her voice was hoarse. Her hair unbrushed. You win, she said. I shook my head. There was no game. Just consequences. She looked around the kitchen like it belonged to someone else. Maybe it did now. I guess this is it, she said. Not quite. I slid a folder across the table. Inside, divorce papers, signed by me. Her hand hovered over the pages like they were radioactive. You're really doing this? She asked. I already did. She blinked. Tears came, but not the kind you feel. The kind you perform when the audience is almost gone. As she stood there, I stepped toward the door. Where will you go? She asked. I smiled. Somewhere I can fold socks in peace. And just like that, I left. No slam doors. No final speeches. No last-minute embraces. Just the satisfying sound of my car door closing. Of the driveway shrinking in the rear view. Of a man reclaiming his narrative. She thought revenge would be loud. But it wasn't. It was slow. Thoughtful. Surgical. And it worked. Because I didn't ruin her life. I just held up a mirror. And let her ruin it herself.